I know what you're thinking. It's a Lotus. It has English problems. Wrong. It has Toyota problems. Let's get started. You said, what? It has nothing to do with a Toyota. That's a Lotus. Again, wrong. This is a 2013 Lotus Evora with a 3.5 liter Toyota V6 and a Toyota automatic transmission from the factory. That's the way they came. This is not uncommon for Lotus. Many of you have seen my buddy Bill's 1995 Lotus Esprit Turbo S4S. It's black. It's been in the shop many times. It has AC Delco parts. It has Ford parts. It has all kind of different parts on it. They've been doing that for a long time. It's not new. With these particular models, they decided just to do the entire powertrain as a Toyota. This car has an issue where you put it in drive and it drives just fine. You're cruising along and it'll just drop out of gear. It'll go into neutral. And you would think, well, it's a transmission problem. But it's not. As we get to it here in a minute, you'll see. This customer had it to a shop in another state, and they had it there for many, many weeks. Finally, they called them and said, what have you found on my Lotus? And they said, we think it's the wiring harness. Toyotas were known to have, in these years, wiring harness problems. Well, so have you verified that? Have you kind of double-checked to be sure that's what it is? Their answer was, no, that's just kind of what we think it is. So it's been sitting there for 4, 5, 6 weeks, and the only answer we have is, I don't know, maybe. That doesn't cut it. And then they wanted to quote them like $8,000 or $9,000 to swap it out, change out the harness, and they weren't even sure if that was the problem. Finally, the owner of this vehicle said, you know what? I'm coming to get my car. You're done. I'm taking it to Kansas, to Omega Auto Clinic. Danielson's been working on this one. He's been diving in. And even though they're at the right place, this is still a very tough problem to find. This isn't something that you find in 30 minutes or an hour. This is one of those situations where diagnosis, not the repair. We're not fixing anything. Just the diagnosis to figure out what's wrong is hours and hours. So, let's take a quick look around this vehicle, and then we're going to get Danielson out here and talk about, we've been through many steps to get to where we're at. We'll talk about it. So here we're at the front, and what looks like would be a big mouth for where the engine would be. No, there is no engine up front. It is in the back. This is airflow. It actually goes in through here, up underneath, and actually comes out through these vents here. Now it looks like you would have seams here that would open up to some sort of a frunk or a trunk. You could store some stuff in there, and it doesn't. Let me open what the only thing is really accessible on here. It's kind of funny. You guys ready? There you go. That's it. That's your frunk. The rest of it would have to be unbolted off. You'd have to take things apart. There is no storage. There was nothing up front. This is just access to get to the brake fluid and also windshield washer fluid. It has its own little latch there. That's all you get. Got some really sweet wheels, and as we go down the side and around the back, you can see that when it was brought here, it's been through a little bit of rain, but that easily rinses off. It's not a big deal. We will rinse it off before it leaves here. But as we come around to the back, it has tail lights reminiscent of a 458 Ferrari, the way they're high up and to the outer edges. It really is a nice look. Really looks really cool. It has one center exhaust outlet in the middle, kind of like a Porsche Boxster. It's really neat how they did that. As we go down the side, you can see it's a nice dark blue color. What would you say that is, Mrs. Wizard?
I think this is a really nice dark blue, nice metallic dark blue.
And yes, and it has a nice black top. Very beautiful color. So here in a little bit, I'll get Danielson out here and we'll take a look in the engine bay and start talking about what we found. But before we do that, let's jump into the interior and take a look at the really nice interior.
Okay, ladies and gents, before we get too terribly started here, well, let's check our gauge cluster out. It says 29,191 miles. And yes, it does say that that door is open because I wanted to show you this door jamb. Back here, there's nothing crazy going on with our door jamb, but as we go further up, you'll see that it gets quite substantial. It's leather wrapped. It's really wide through here, and it's got the lovely Lotus and the Union Jack on there, but this is pretty impressive for a door jamb. But let's get back to that gauge cluster. So as we look at this gauge cluster, we have a really nice red glowing look to it. It looks really impressive, but looking good. Nothing fancy, nothing too complicated in there. As we move up, of course, with only 20,000 miles on here, this is in really good shape. Got a beautiful leather wrapped dash. Got nice circle vents. Got a nice Sony radio in there. And as we move down, just some simple dial controls. Nothing crazy, nothing complicated. They've kept it nice and simple in here. And here is our gear selector. Not overly complicated as well. We just have, reverse, neutral, drive, our big park button, and then we have a fun little button down here which puts it into sport mode. As we move to our center seat area, this has got to be one of the tiniest little armrests I've ever seen. It is just this little bitty sliver. You will be definitely fighting with the passenger if you're trying to both use this sucker. And it is just, and it does move up, just an armrest. There is no little hidey hole in there. As we look at our seats, they have impressive bolster on the side. They definitely hug you, not only on the sides of your body, but also on the sides of your hip on the lower section as well. Quite impressive. You'll also see that the seat is lower than the door seal as well, so you definitely drop into this car. As we look at our floor, we'll see that the floor mat is down there, but we also see it has an added extension in the back. No, you'll see that it has lots of fuses and relays and a lot of electrical wires going on back there, and obviously that is where we are spending a lot of time trying to investigate what is going on with this car. And as we look to our back section, it is in a bit of disarray, yes. And that is because, of course, it is being investigated, and Danielson is taking different pieces and parts off because he's got to be able to access all those wires and different connections to make sure of where is the actual problem with this car. As we look at the headliner, though, it's in really good condition. Love this bar going across, where it obviously is a protective bar if it were to roll over, like a rollover bar, but it's nicely encased all in a lovely, really dark charcoal gray Alcantara. We're back to the steering wheel, and as boring as those buttons were for the gear selector, there's one saving grace, and it's a very fun saving grace. In the words of Jeremy Clarkson, it has flappy paddles. And so that definitely will make this much more fun to drive than just pushing that simple button over on the side. So flappy pedals are saving this car, making it a blast to drive. But anyway, it's got a simple Lotus here in the center. Got just some simple controls on the side as well. Got that lower half of this steering wheel is flat to make it easier to fit into the car. The steering wheel also has lovely finger bumps on the back and a nice section here just to hold on to, nice to grip that steering wheel. One last thing before I say goodbye is one area is on each side of the steering wheel. You'll see that we have lots of push button controls for things as lights and some traction control, open the gas cap, things like that. And then we go to the other side. We've got more buttons over here as well. So definitely hiding them, not to make them impossible to see, but definitely to integrate them more into the look of the car. So enough of this interior review. Let's get that engine bay open. Let's see what that Toyota engine looks like in a Lotus.
Here we are. There's not very much room to work in there, is it?
Nope.
Very, very tight. A lot of people will actually unbolt this entire rear clamshell to work on the engine and to get to a lot of things, but this is the Toyota 3.5 liter V6 that's in a Sienna, a Camry, a Venza, all the different makes and models of Toyotas. Basically the same setup. It looks like a 4-cylinder, but this is the intake, and underneath that is the next bank of cylinders, just like in a Toyota. As you can see, it's pretty tight in there. You can see the little orange tubing back there is actually ventilation for the exhaust manifolds. It lets heat rise up through a little neck in the mesh there. You can see it through the mesh. Pretty interesting. So the complaint was it would drop out of gear while driving. You went and drove it. It actually does that, huh?
Yes.
Like you're cruising along, it just goes into neutral?
Yep. I was actually downshifting into second gear, and it just decided to go into neutral, and then that's it. It would not shift back to park, reverse, or drive. Nothing.
Yeah, and the customer said you basically had to pull over, turn the car off, and start it back up and it would be working again?
Actually, not in my case. The key was stuck because I couldn't put it in park. So luckily I had the scan tool and I got it that way. But I think what the customer meant probably pulled a battery or something like that because it would not go into park.
Okay. So he did verify that it is acting up in that way. And here is a list of the codes. And you look at all these things, it looks very scary. You see throttle body codes, you see transmission codes, ECM, communication codes. And it kind of, you go through checking all these things. It was like you went through and checked a whole bunch of connectors. You like the interior apart and stuff?
Yeah, I just went, wire to wire, checked ohm resistance, voltages, just to kind of confirm.
And one thing we found, actually talked to Jared Pink from the Questionable Garage. He's a certified Toyota Master Tech. He's like a Toyota guru. And he got to looking at the codes and he said, guys, these codes are permanent codes. They're not current or pending. They're just in the background. It's something that happened a long time ago. That's not currently what is happening at the moment. So all these crazy looking codes you just saw, we just have to disregard those. We can't even clear them. Only the dealer tool can clear those out. But there was like one or two that does keep coming back, right?
Yes, but they don't really point to anything, honestly.
They don't point to anything. Danielson has actually gone to work, and we'll take a look in the interior here in a minute. He's actually pulled a lot of the wiring apart, tracing wiring, wire by wire, checking the throttle body, checking all various different sensors. Let's take a look real quick. So as you can see there, Danielson has the rear seats removed and a lot of panels removed to get to these wiring harnesses. And these are a lot of the communication wires and things that are back here that you can actually get to them and do the testing. You can see they run all through here. And one thing interesting while we're here, you can see is that a lot of this body of this car is not riveted or bolted together. It's actually bonded. That's not orange high temp silicone. That's actual really hard bonding glue. Pretty cool. So anyways, been back here doing a lot of wiring checks. So like I mentioned, this isn't one of those 30-minute jobs that you real quick find out what the problem is. We don't want to be like the other shop and just kind of shrug our shoulders. We actually want to know exactly why this is acting up. And we're kind of down to like two things, right? What is it? The wiring harness and...
Or maybe just one module in the system that's bringing everything down whenever you're shifting, driving around, movement might be causing something to take the CAN network, the communication network in the car down.
Right. That's one of those situations where we're going to have to drive it with the scan tool and watch, or even an oscilloscope, watch the CAN bus and see while you're driving, does it drop down? And if it does, we're going to have to go through unplugging module by module to figure out what it is. And if it ends up not being the modules, then all the thing is left, which is a common problem, huh? The wiring harness?
It is the wiring harness, yes.
Yeah. With Camry, Siennas, and various other Toyota vehicles that use this setup, in the 2012, 11, 13 year ranges, they had major wiring harness problems. And the fix was all new engine wiring harness. We think it might be that, but we want to be for sure, huh?
Yeah, it's got to be expensive, so you make sure you bring in some evidence.
Yeah, we don't just say, we'll just throw this harness on here. Oops, that didn't work. Something else is wrong. That's definitely not what we want to do here. Very time consuming. So anyways, I'll let you go back to your break. Thanks for showing us what we got going on here.
Thank you.
So as you can see, Danielson's been very busy figuring out what exactly is going wrong with this car. We're at the last few steps. We have a few more steps to go, and then we will have a concrete answer, and then we can present to the customer the guaranteed fix. Whether they want to pay for it or not, that has yet to be discovered. But we're here to find out at least why is it doing that, and what is it going to take to fix it. We've worked on several of these in the shop. They're always a joy to work on. Toyota is really a reliable company. It just happens to have wiring harness issues. In those years, we're getting really close to finding out if that's the same scenario going on here. Again, Jared Pink from Questionable Garage, I talked to him and he said offhand, his money goes to the wiring harness. He thinks that's what it is. But again, we want to find out for sure. Wanted to show you guys around this beautiful Lotus Evora before it's gone. And wanted to show you how sometimes when you bring your car to the shop, you won't have an answer the same day. Maybe even not the next day or the third day. There's a whole lot that has to be done to get the right answer. Luckily, the customer understands that, and we're going to go ahead and figure that out for them. If you're curious what kind of tools we use to work on this Lotus, or really any car that's in the shop, check our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut if you purchase anything. We really appreciate it. Make sure to check out Mrs. Wizard's Ways as well. In the description below, there's a link to go check out her channel. A lot of new videos there. And make sure to hit the subscribe button here. We have many more cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.